And we're joined by Cincinnati coach Luke Fickell. Cincinnati began its season Saturday at UCLA. Cincinnati won the game 26-17. Cincinnati will face Miami of Ohio Saturday at Paul Brown Stadium in Cincinnati in the annual battle for the Victory Bell. The game will be at 8 p.m. Eastern and will be on ESPN3. And again, as we mentioned at the top of the call, Brian Wright of Cincinnati is the American Defensive Player of the Week. Coach, thanks so much for joining us on the call. If you would take a minute to tie up the game at UCLA, please. And we expect to see as you get into the rivalry game against Miami, Ohio, Saturday, please.
Chuck, stand by 1 second for Coach. He's right here.
You got it.
Hello.
Coach, thanks for joining us on the call. If you would, please take a minute to tie up the game at UCLA, please. Maybe a word or two about Brian Wright's performance as our Defensive Player of the Week and what you expect to see as you get into the Victory Bell game against Miami of Ohio.
Well, to start off with, any game on the road is a huge game, and for us, new in the program and things like that, it's an incredible building block. And I mean that because of, when you're on the road, this is all you got. Your celebrations and things like that when you're on the road are really just with your team. And I think those are the things that go so far. If you're at home, yeah, you celebrate in 10, 15 minutes, everybody's out and they're with families and friends and girlfriends and things like that. And when you're on the road, you stick around for a little while, you celebrate, you have a good time in that locker room, and those guys build some of those things that you can't even do at home. So I think that goes a long way in what it is that we're doing, and I think that's where, you start to get excited. You can't get too far out in front of yourself. It's, it's a big win for us, but you can't all of a sudden start to, listen to everybody that, tells you did a great job now that you've, won one game and you're 1-0. So there's a balance there that we haven't had to worry about here since I've been here, is being able to handle a little bit of success and people talking positively about you. So can't allow it to affect us and change, the work ethic and habits that we've started to create. Brian Wright obviously had a great game. He does a lot of different things for us. The great thing for us is Brian Wright gets co-defensive player of the week, and for us and our team in the defense, Marquise Copeland gets player of the game. So there's a lot of positives there. Some notoriety obviously for Brian, who did a great job, but there's some other guys, within this team that played their butts off too and got recognized by their peers as well. And then stepping into a rivalry game, coming off a big win, coming off of 2,000 miles of travel and getting home at 6 in the morning, it takes another little step here in seeing what kind of maturity and what kind of leadership we have, going into this game here and being able to build off of the positives that we had from last week.
A question now for Coach Luke Fickell. Hit *1 on your telephone keypad to join the queue. The operator will introduce you.
Our first question comes from Dan Totora from WakeUpCallDT.com. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Coach. How are you?
How we doing, Dan?
Doing well. To kind of go off what you were talking about and getting this victory, I know for Cincinnati, it's sometimes, it's felt since you've come there, few and far between and trying to build on some of these. To get a win like this to start this season, just what it says about, if you feel like that new era is coming, if you feel like the energy is changing in Cincinnati.
Well, I don't want to put all of it out in front of us from the get-go because, it's a long year and a long season. But you're right. We won a few games last year, only 4, but none that felt like this. And I mean that is, there's sometimes, a couple of games we won last year were out of relief. It's almost like, oh, my goodness, I can't believe, as opposed to this one being out of sheer, pure guts. And there's a lot of difference in the joy and the things that come from, to me, this victory here in the beginning of the year. So the building blocks are what's really big, and I don't just mean that because you have success, but because you see other things that come together. Being on the road, seeing guys go down. We had Brian Wright, who's co-player of the game, co-player of the week in the league, goes down, cramps up, and the backup linebacker's got to go in there. One of our better back end guys, and James Wiggins, cramps up there at the key time of the game, and a guy who was a starter last year had to go in and fill in for him. So when you see those things happen, and you see guys kind of step in and take their roles and continue to go with it, I think that's what makes me, the coaching staff, and then those guys that are in this locker room start to realize that there's a lot of things that are being built and are going in a positive direction.
And when you look at Warren in the backfield, just what you can say about, how he carried this offense, just what he was able to do. in this game on the road. And, I mean, he led in receiving yards, but on the ground, obviously, is where a lot of the hay was. Just what you can say about his play.
Well, he's the energy. He's the spark. And, no matter what, on teams, on offenses, on defenses, you got to have those guys who are the energy guys, energy givers. Everybody wants to be around them. I know I, as a coach, want to be around players and guys who are energy givers, and that's what Mike is. Yes, he had a great game. Yes, he, carried the ball for 141 yards, 142 yards, and 30-some times. But all in all, he's an energy giver, and I think he provides so much more for us, for our offense, and for our team. So, that's we're going to continue to build upon it, and know at some point in time, we're going to need some help from some others, and I mean that carrying the football as well.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it. Congrats on the win.
Sure. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Mark Narducci from Philadelphia Inquirer. Please go ahead.
Hey, Coach, can you tell me what it was like preparing for a Chip Kelly team, his first game back? I'm sure there was all the hype there, and he was getting a lot of the mention. But what was it like? Because they can do a lot of different things on offense. What was that like preparing and going up against Chip?
It's difficult. I mean, anytime it's difficult when you're coming into, the first game of the season with the guys making a lot of changes. Difficult when you're coming in, obviously, the first game with a completely new coaching staff. But when it's, Chip Kelly coming not just from Oregon, but coming from the NFL, there's a lot of unknowns that, okay, what has he changed? What has he done different? What will he do different? So, the only thing you probably had that you knew were going to get consistently was some version of tempo and the speed of the game. So the challenge was to our defensive staff to say, okay, hey, let's make sure you can kind of limit it down, put the heat on you guys to only give them certain things. Let's work the things we truly believe are going to happen and go from there. We can't ask our kids to know every single thing that possibly you studied from the time he was at Oregon to the time he was at the Philadelphia Eagles to the time he was at the 49ers. So I got to give a lot of credit to the defensive staff and saying, hey, we're just going to hone in on these things. And you know what, they were pretty on with what they had planned for and what they had shown the guys.
How tough was it going against that kind of tempo, though?
Well, I mean, you see tempo so much more nowadays, but it doesn't change still what he does and what Coach Kelly does. So, it's not always the tempo that gets you because, you see it in this league, you see it from our offense. It's the combination of the ability to do that, still run multiple things with their offense, and especially when they have some bigger plays. So I can tell you that we did a lot better job than obviously we did last year with some of the tempo from UCF and other teams. But the reality is because we did a better job at containing the big plays.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Leo Haggerty from It Sports magazine. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Coach.
How we doing?
I'm doing fine for Labor Day, Coach. Thanks for asking, and congrats on that big win on the left coast. Coach, going into
some of us have to labor on Labor Day, right?
Coach, that's a shame. It shouldn't happen. Coach, going into the first game, what major question did you have about your team that you had answered?
Leadership, and I don't mean we've done a lot of things and grown along the way, grown a lot, but I really wanted to see what kind of leadership we would have when guys got tired, when some of our leaders who are better players, what was going to happen when a bad play or something bad happened. And I love the leadership and I love the guys we got, but I think they hadn't been really tested in handling some of those adverse situations. Maybe they weren't leaders last year. Maybe they were leaders a little bit last year for us, but all in all, we didn't do a great job at handling those tougher situations. So, to be honest, that was my biggest concern. The guys that we were counting on to be leaders, how would they handle it when either they got tired because of the speed and the tempo of the game, or how would they handle it if they gave up a big play, or how would we handle it if we turned the ball over and those kinds of things. And I think we handled it much better than we did last year, and I think that's why we all feel about where we're headed and what's going on inside that locker room.
Thank you, Coach. Good luck in the Battle of Ohio this weekend.
Thank you.
Hey, Coach, before we let you go, can we please get your quick thoughts on the upcoming matchup with Miami? Certainly, you referenced in your remarks earlier not wanting to put too much stock in one win on the road and kind of ending that celebration early. Do you just need to throw in last year's video from the game against Miami to kind of bring you guys back to earth a little bit?
There's no doubt. I mean, I think that from the reality is, and I've only been a part of one of them, but maybe even the last 4 or 5, we've been outplayed. And maybe the scoreboard didn't end up showing it at the end, but I think that's how you got to learn. You got to learn what rivalries are all about. You can take records, you can take different things and throw them out the window. It comes down to making the plays when they come your way, and 1 yard really is more like 2 yards. 2 yards is more like 4 yards in rivalry situations because of momentum and energy and things like that. So it's a great lesson learned from us last year, for me last year as well, as obviously in many different ways about finishing, but what rivalry games are all about, and what we see on film from maybe what we saw last year or even from them the first week is going to be completely different.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time this week. Look forward to hearing from you again next Monday.